The command line environment offers several functions for viewing the contents of a file. These include head, tail, less, and cat. We'll take a look at each of these here. If you want to follow along on your own, the example files you'll need are on Google Drive at the address on the screen. It's also pasted in a pinned comment on this video. In my terminal, I'm going to cd or change my working directory to the folder on my computer where I save those example files. Here, I'm using the tilde at the beginning of the path. Remember from the video navigating in the terminal that the tilde is just a shortcut for your home directory. Once I get there, I'll list the contents of that directory with ls. If you're following along, you should have these same two files in your working directory, example1.fq and example2.fq. The two files we're working with here are plain text files that contain DNA sequence data in a specific format called FASTQ. If you're not familiar with that and you're interested, you can check out the video that describes FASTQ format, but there's no need to do that right now. It's really not necessary to understand exactly what's in these files for these exercises. One thing that is really important, though, is that these are plain text files. If you're working with a file that came out of something like Microsoft Word, Excel, or any other programs that aren't plain text editors, you probably won't be able to work with that file at command line unless it has been explicitly saved as plain text instead of the default format. That can usually be done by selecting plain text under a Save As option within the program. If you ever find yourself running any of the commands in this video and getting file contents returned that just look weird, probably with lots of random characters and symbols that don't make any sense to you, check to make sure the file is plain text. Since the files we're working with are plain text, we can start exploring their contents with a pair of commands, head and tail, that have a pretty similar function. Here, I'm running the head command on the example1.fq file. By default, it pulls out the first 10 lines of the file and prints them to your screen. It's easy to customize the number of lines printed by head with the -n argument. In this case, I'm specifying I want the first 4 lines instead of the default 10. Actually, just passing -4 as an argument and leaving the end part of the argument out is also an option with head, and is the way I generally use this command. Tail is similar to head, with the exception that, as you might guess, it prints the last lines of the file instead of the first lines. So, tail-3 example1.fq prints the last 3 lines of this file. With tail, instead of starting at the last line and counting backwards from there, as we just did with -3 to get the last 3 lines, you can alternatively use the plus notation to tell tail to print everything starting at a specific line in the file. For example, the example1.fq file has 40 lines in it. If I type tail plus 35 example1.fq, it starts at line 35 and prints the remaining lines up to the end of the file. A second way to view the contents of a file is with the less command. Less opens up the file in your terminal window, allowing you to scroll through it. When I type less example1.fq and hit enter, I see the contents of that file. In the most basic usage of less, here you can either scroll through the file a line at a time with the up and down arrow keys, or use the spacebar to move a page at a time. When you're finished, just hit Q for quit. Q and the spacebar represent two of a much larger number of commands that are available within less. To see the full list, you can view the manual page for less by typing man less at your command prompt. The man page provides detailed instructions for how to use the command. Don't overwhelm yourself trying to memorize a bunch of those specific commands and arguments, though. Frankly, I've never used most of them, and when you do need something, it's easy to give the man page a quick check. It's worth mentioning here that this man command, which again is short for manual, works for every command available at command line, and these manual pages are great resources for getting information about the commands. When you're finished with the man page, just hit Q to get back to your command prompt. We'll use less to open our file one more time to try out a couple of what I think are the more useful commands. To open the file back up, you can either type the command in again, or just hit the up arrow to go back through your history until you see less example1.fq and hit enter. Let's say we want to jump ahead to a specific line in the file. I can type the line number, say 20, then hit G. and this will cause less to scroll ahead to line 20 in the file. Less also provides a search function. Let's first scroll back to the top of the file. If you have specific text you want to search for in the file, hit the / and you'll see it show up in the bottom left corner of the screen. Then enter the text you're looking for. I'll search for the sequence TGCAA and hit enter. And less then highlights each instance of that pattern. Again, you can hit Q at any point to exit less. The last command we'll work with in this video on viewing files at command line is cat, which is short for concatenate. Cat accepts one or more files, concatenates the files together if there is more than one, and then, by default, prints the results to the screen. Here, I'm simply printing both example files to the screen, one right after the other. What we're seeing are the last 20 lines or so of the second file, but if you're following along on your own, you can scroll up to see everything, all the way back to the beginning of the first file. It turns out, though, that printing entire files to the terminal is usually not all that useful. At least in my experience, the most practical use of the cat command is when its output is redirected to a new file. This has the effect of combining the contents of more than one file into a single file. For example, I can run the same command again, but this time redirect the output with the right arrow to a new file named allseeks.fq. I can then run the ls or list command and see that the new allseeks.fq file exists, and I can take a look at its contents with less allseeks.fq. The contents are the result of concatenating files example1.fq and example2.fq. Once you feel comfortable with these 4 commands, you might want to have a look at some of the other videos related to working with files, which include one on getting information about files at command line, and another on editing files with Nano, which is a command line based text editor.